everyone, and welcome to the first episode of our podcast, The Rabbi's Daughter. I'm Shira, I'm 22, and we're very excited to be here.
We are. I'm Yoshua Pfeffer. I'm in the Rabbi's Daughter podcast. I'm the rabbi,
Oh
clearly.
yeah, I'm the daughter.
And clearly, we have a clear division of roles over here. I'm not 22. I grew up in London, but I moved here to Israel when I was 17. Spent a long time in Torah study, became a Dayan, rabbinical judge, served for a few years in that office, then branched out to do plenty of other things also. And I'm very excited to be starting a podcast with Shira, a family podcast. So it really is exciting, and really looking forward to these conversations.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So we're going to start every episode with a quote. So today we're going to speak about the generational gap. And the quote we chose is from Kohelet. It goes in Hebrew, אל תאמר מה היה, שהימים הראשונים היו טובים מאלה, כי לא מחוכמה שאלת על זה. In English, do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. It's from Kohelet, Zayin Yud. In English?
Yeah, Ecclesiastes. We don't need the English. It's good.
Fine.
Kohelet.
Okay, and this quote really says that, these old people that say, oh, in our times, things were different, things were better. And obviously, I don't like that because I'm not in these times yet. But really, we want to speak today about the generational gap in general, not just our gap. There are many questions about it. Does it actually exist? Is it good? Is it bad? Were the old people like better than us? I don't know. maybe I'll be better than my grandchildren. So the first question I want to ask is, does it exist? Is it an actual thing? And is it good or bad?
Yeah, so I think generational gaps, they exist by definition. In every generation or every historical progression, you're going to have differences between one generation and the next. And is it good or bad? First of all, it's a reality, and it's something which you're going to have to live with. It's going to have its advantages and its challenges, but it's a reality. Comes to mind a quote from Ronald Dworkin. Ronald Dworkin is a law professor, American, Jewish, and he spoke about the role of judges. He said, judges of each generation, they write the next chapter of a book, which is a book that continues as a kind of serialized chapters over the course of generations. And it's our task to write the next chapter of the law. And the next chapter will never be the same as the previous chapter. The big question is, how close is it going to be?
And should it be?
And should it be? Right. And should it be? So the should it be is a question of, the liberal conservative divide. The conservatives will say, well, the new chapter has to be really close to the previous one.
Yeah.
And you do your best to do that. While the liberals will say, we don't care so much about the previous chapter. Let the new chapter be whatever it needs to be. Let it be authentic. Let it be itself. Let it not worry too much about what happened in the previous chapters. And I think that the generational gap, today is more of a gap, but in good ways too. One way, for example, is when I was growing up, there was a lot more rigidity. It was more rigid, and even in a religious sense, it was more, I would say, a yira approach, a kind of fear of God, fear of society.
Yes, it was also fear of the parents, grandparents.
Yeah, fear of parents who were more strict and severe. And, it brought up a certain type of typecast, a certain type of generation that was kind of molded in those ideas of yira, of being afraid of punishment, retribution, both divine from Hashem, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and from teachers. And today, I think that's very different. I think that the modern, the kind of today's kids, your generation, is not growing up in that environment. It's an environment of more of searching for yourself, of meaning, of self-fulfillment.
It's interesting though, because the environment that you described that you grew up in, it's been like this for ages. And then now it changed. It's not like it wasn't a cycle. It didn't change all the time. It was like this forever.
Well, you could say it's been like that forever. Forever, we don't have a collective memory.
My forever.
Right, we don't have a collective forever memory. But yes, I mean, over the course of modernity, there's been a kind of trend towards greater individualism, towards greater values that place an emphasis on kind of self-fulfillment. But I think that reached a religious place more recently, certainly in the Frum or in the Haredi space. In
like
the
respect the rabbis and...
Yeah, which is more, we still stand up when the rabbi comes in or when the teacher comes in school.
Well, less and less.
Well, is
like
that...
rabbis, standing up for rabbis, it doesn't happen all the time anymore.
So the gap's bigger than I thought. But I mean, I think it's good that we stand up for rabbis. I think we need to maintain the decorum, the respect, the yira, the fear, the awe on a certain level. There has to be some distance. And I think the generational gap is very, very much realized or expressed in the lack of that distance. And there's something good about that, because you don't want the distance to be too big, not between you and Hashem. Hashem, is a God of love, a God of closeness, a God that you want to focus on the relationship with, but not to entirely do away, not to entirely negate the distance, the respect, the awe, those sides of the connection. And I think it should be the same also. I think it should be, I'm sounding like a parent, but I think also with parents and teachers. But that definitely is one strong side of the generational gap.
Yeah, I think individualism has a lot to do with that, like the search to be the best version of myself and not caring about anything else. Yeah,
I certainly think that the liberal spirit, which is a spirit that speaks a lot about individualism, about the self, rather than the family, the community, the nation, that has a lot to do with it. And I think we cannot ignore the fact that that's just us. We've internalized those ideas. Even in your Haredi Beis Yaakov school, you'll speak to your consultant, your advisor, on which track to go through or what to study, and she'll speak about self-realization. Whereas in the past, you're born into a family of, goldsmiths or carpenters or whoever, and that's just what you'll do without question, and you'll be realized. You won't even think about this idea of self-realization. You'll be realized as being a family, a community, a nation. And today, of course, we look for that individual self-realization. I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it becomes challenging, or it becomes potentially damaging when it conflicts too violently or too deeply with the family belonging, the community belonging, the national belonging. That's the fear. That's where the education comes in. And the kind of the older generation, mine, will try to say, hey, 1 second, it's family first. We need to maintain those identities. We need to maintain the loyalty, in a certain sense, to the family, to the community, to the nation, and not to lose that in this kind of new era of self-realization and individualism.
Yeah, I think that's also why you see differences in the education system. Like if you see the Haredi one and the Tilomi and the Chiloni. So in my high school, we stood up every time a teacher came in. I mean, we tried to. It was like what we should have done. It was like a thing that you should do. My friend is a teacher in the Tilomi school. They don't even think about it. It's not a thing. And some of them even call the teacher by her name. In the Chiloni, in the Chiloni system, that's like a very common thing. Yeah, you just call the teachers by their first name. Also in universities, you call the lecturer in the first name, no? We used to.
You do. It was a bit, for me, this was actually shocking.
Really?
Yeah, my first ever, I don't know if I told you this, my first ever lecture that I attended at Hebrew University, my first day at law school. So the
you were
dean,
like ready with your hat and
I came with my hat and jacket. I found somewhere at the back, like I created this hat and jacket, storage at the back of the room. I was the only Haredi guy in the room for sure.
How many years ago was it? It was like
15 years ago.
Wow.
Like 2008 or something. So I came into the lecture hall, and the dean of the law faculty, what we call in Israel the law school, he gets up and he says, "Hi, I'm Barak." His name is Barak Medina. And he says, "Hi, I'm Barak."
Yeah, we all know who this is.
And that's right. He became the rector of Hebrew University. He's somebody that I'm in close touch with in any case. So he gets up and he says, "Hi, I'm Barak." And he's dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is this? This is the Rosh Hashiva, And he's getting up in jeans and a t-shirt and saying, "Hi, I'm Barak." And by the way, he's a modest guy and somebody that I developed a relationship with. But it was shocking to me, the fact that there's no hierarchy, that there's no pretensions of being, a Rosh Hashiva, like a dean. The first name is your identity. It's not even a family name. I am a first name because that's me. And my raison d'etre, how I see myself, is realizing my first name, who I am as an individual, not the family name, not the belonging. I don't even remember if he said, like, I'm the dean of the law faculty. Like this, "Hi, I'm Barak." In any case, that's what stuck in your mind. And that's, you're right. In the Haredi space, I think, good for us that we're maintaining the decorum.
It's changing.
It's changing naturally because we're parts of the world, and no matter.
But do you think there is a point where you'll say, like, that's it, we shouldn't go there?
Yeah, I think so. I think we need to be able to stand up for principles, and part of those principles is maintaining some distance, some decor, some ability to appreciate. You know what? It's even like kibud avaim. The Torah tells us you have to respect your parents, your elders. That's something which is so core. You have to know where you come from.
Why do you think, though, it's so core? What does it give the kids, let's say? What does it give me? To respect my lecturers, my parents, my grandparents.
One second. What do you think? What does it give you?
I guess it gives me a sense of where I come from and more of a clear way of where am I going also. Because if I know my roots, then I know what I'm here for. But if you see, let's say, people that grew up not religious, so it's hard to say that they have this purpose because, obviously everyone has their values and things that they live for, but, and everyone can learn from their parents, but is there like a gap that you should maintain? If
Absolutely.
It's not a journey, like I believe, like because I'm religious, I believe there's like a journey that we're all part of, and then obviously like my parents have a role in it, and then I'm continuing it. But if you don't believe in that,
well, listen, I think the gap is essential for your self-fulfillment. I really think so. Meaning your self-fulfillment will be in the gap, in that space. The generational gap, or that honor, that idea of honor, it's not dignity, it's not even respect, it's an honor thing.
Yeah, it's kibud avayim. It's
kibud avayim. So that anchors you somewhere. You're anchored in a tradition. You're anchored in something that you don't ask questions about. You respect it. It's where you come from. Now, of course, I'm not saying you don't ask questions ever.
Yeah, it's
of
hard
course,
to
there
find
are questions.
this.
You have to find a balance. You have to strike a balance. But your anchor of where you came from, of the values that you've received from home, you don't treat them in the same way as something you've just read on Wikipedia that you say, you know what, maybe this is garbage, or maybe I should, throw this out. You don't treat it in the same way. I'm not saying you don't question. Of course, ultimately you'll question, you'll build your own life, you'll go on your own journey. But having that anchor sets the parameters, gives you borders. It sets a vision for where you can go. And you know, when everything is open,
you can't choose. It's too much.
Yeah, you can't make efficient choices between infinite options. It doesn't work. And to have that culture of respect, that culture of honor, of saying, this is my family, and family is honor, and family is something that defines who I am and gives me a sense of purpose, and family, community, nation, all of these are things that I think they create this gap. And of course, you know, you won't be the same as your parents are.
Yeah.
And that's good, because we want to, you know, to move on, and the world changes and people change. And of course, that defines, or at least it delineates the kind of new contours of where you're going. But we want that to be the new chapter of this book that we're writing together, we're writing together. And the gap is kind of, it gives you the space in which to write your chapter, because there's a gap there. If there's no gap, then you're just writing a new book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The spirit of this gap, though, it changed a lot, because once, like you said, it used to be more fear and more of like intimidation, and that was the way to keep everyone together, to keep the family's honor, and this is what we're here for, and this is what we'll do. And today, it's more about, you can say even love. It's more about, I mean, it's funny to say because you're my dad, but like for me, I think about what keeps me part of the family, and what's important for me is not just the, oh, sure, that's what you're supposed to do, that's what you should do, and that's what's right. It's more just, I love my family, and you included, obviously.
Thank you, Shir.
But I really think that's what keeps today children and grown-ups really to stay connected, and not the concept of like the right thing to do.
Well, that's good. Meaning that's a good articulation of the spirit in which you're growing up, even in the Haredi space, and I think that's revealing. You know, there was a certain group of singers who coined the sentence, "All you need is love."
Yeah, you love that.
Love is all you need, and that's nonsense. I mean, that's just not true. Not all you need is love, and not love is all you need. But it's certainly true that love is one big thing that you need, and especially, you're right, especially in the current day and age, where we do look at ourselves as an individual much more than we used to. The love is what keeps us charged and keeps the connection between ourselves and the world around us. You know, that connection has to be a connection through love. You're right. If it's just, I'm not myself,
also,
I'm a
especially
family.
today, that the gap is, it grows faster all the time, because things change so quickly. I mean, with even social media, things change so fast that the connection has to be more than just
you're
continuing what I'm doing.
Right, it's hard.
It's hard to see it.
It's hard to define the entire identity as do what the family does, because every few years, like, what we do changes and how we do it changes. I think that's a fair point. However, you certainly can't say all you need is love, because there's a lot of content. I'm saying there's still a lot of content. The core values, you know, Avraham Avinu gives us values of tzedakah mishpat, of righteousness and justice. Now, you're right. The way in which you realize righteousness and justice doesn't stay the same. The situation is different, the conditions, you know, our circumstances are anything but static. But those values remain core values, and they're not that abstract either. There are ways in which we receive from our... I
mean, today they're kind of abstract, but...
for some, but again, in the spaces that we try to create with this gap, there's more definition there, there's more content, there's more how we do it. and at the same time, I think you're right. The parents today who are bringing up their children with the same regime as 50 years ago, that's just not going to work, because you're not bringing up your
It's
kids in a
interesting.
vacuum.
It doesn't work in the Western culture because things are so different here, but it does work in different places. I just read about it. Like in China and in Japan and places like that, it still works.
Okay.
But we'll see for how long. It changes also.
Okay, but that's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Meaning the culture itself changes, and our culture isn't the same. Even our, I'm just thinking about the kind of even music, that I grew up with and that you're growing up with.
Just like we spoke before, it's not a fair point, because you grew up in England and my childhood songs were like 80s music.
Well, I had the privilege
guitars.
of bringing up my kids with 80s music. That's true. I don't deny that. But still, you get older and then you choose your own music.
Yeah.
And the kind of music that you guys are bringing home is still...
Yeah, it's very different.
It's still very, very different. There's a real generational gap in that. In the Haredi space, certainly. In the Haredi space, a generation ago, there was no modern Israeli music going on.
No movies, no secular books.
Secular books. Again, you had secular books, you had non-religious books, but it wasn't part of Haredi life in such a...
Yeah, nobody discussed The Lord of the Rings in school.
Yeah, and nobody spoke about, Akiva, whoever he's called.
Also, they didn't exist
and other
so much.
Artists. They didn't.
These artists,
that's right. The cult, it's two-way.
Yeah.
You didn't have Frum or Haredi artists being played on Galgalatz, and you also didn't have these kind of non-Haredi artists being brought into Haredi homes. It's a two-way kind of cultural change, cultural shift. It's less to do with the gap that we spoke about before, but that certainly is a part of the generational gap that we're experiencing today. Parents, like Haredi parents.
It's also the individual part that it's like, I hear music from my friends and they give me books and I like it, so I bring it home as a child.
Right.
And if my parents don't like it, then
you're not thinking,
they don't have to listen.
Right. You're not thinking, what does my family do?
No.
No, you don't. You never think that?
Maybe a bit. You used to tell me once, I remember, what was it? I think I wanted to watch a movie with friends or something, and you were like, no, we don't do that. That was years ago, and today you won't say that. I don't think so.
Well, one reason, because you're big.
And I remember once I wanted to watch a certain movie, and it was a movie or a book, I don't know. And you said also, like, in our house we don't do it. It was mommy probably. And I got really upset by it.
Really?
Yeah, because like...
What, families can't lay down the law?
I could rent an apartment now. It's not like... I was like 18 or 19, I don't know. I could rent my own apartment. I could get married. So like, I could decide.
So, okay, that's...
But it was like, this is our house. And in our house, we don't do that.
You got upset and then you went to bed and you were upset, or you actually thought about it and you thought, you know what, maybe this makes sense a bit. I wasn't that upset.
It wasn't... Yeah, I was fine with it. But... I got the point, like it's a fair point, like it's your house, it's not my house, so you get to set the rules, but it was like I didn't get the Tana.
Yeah, the claim, the idea, the argument.
Yeah, I didn't get it so much, because like what difference does it make if I watch it, like if I'm away and I watch it, and if I'm at home and I watch it? It was like...
Right, so I think that's a good indication of how things are. But I imagine when you'll be a parent, God willing, and then, as a parent, you have to think about the way you shape and mold your home, and what comes in, what doesn't come in. After a while, you can also say, okay, we give up. Not entirely, but we give up on certain things. As children change, this is part of being a parent.
Do you call it giving up, though, or just changing?
Yeah.
Because I don't think we give up by watching Minions. It's not like I give up on something. It's just we change.
Yeah, so, I mean, we let's say we concede, we agree to a certain change that we might not have wanted to lead on our own. We wouldn't have chosen to lead this change because we have a conception of what we want the house to look like. And that's a conception that we develop, of course, over the years, and it's something that we receive from our own parents and so on. And then we say, 1 second, the generation, the kids, the friends, it's going somewhere else, and we're going to have to, quote unquote, compromise, or we're going to have to embrace it even. You're right. It's not saying, oh, we're going to have to suffer it. It might be saying we're going to have to embrace it. And that certainly happened, let's say, in kind of the music content of the home. You know, I'm not being a stickler for 80s music anymore. You know, it's gone somewhere else entirely, and that's because of the children.
There are songs that we play at home now that many years ago you would say, like, not many years ago, like 4 years ago, you would say, like, hey, what is this song? I don't allow things like that.
I would say that.
Yeah, and today it's like the norm.
Right. So yeah, absolutely. And the truth is, it doesn't stop with culture. It's also ideas, you know, the kind of ideas, the kind of ideologies.
Ideas, it's more tricky though, because if it's your ideology, then you do see your kids as like they're continuing my legacy.
Yes, but with adjustments. It's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
You can't
How big adjustments though? Right.
So listen, you're right.
Let's say decades ago, if a child would stop, he won't be religious. So the parents would be like, okay, get out of here.
Decades ago, that's today. Shira, that still happens today.
No, way
less and less. You know what? I'm involved with Haredi Army.
Right.
And we still have families who will not come to their children's ceremonies.
Do you think it's
that will not allow their children back home, certainly not in uniform. I think that's terrible. Okay.
I know you think it's terrible, because if I would do it, you would obviously not throw me out. But it's a challenge to not be like this, because then what do you accept, what do you don't accept, and then like as children, it's like, yeah, you can do anything. That's fine. You just
right. So that's exactly why
it's like the how do you say metach, the tension between Haredim and Dati Leumi. It's like it's a bit of this, because how do you accept people that are different, that they choose a different way?
So first of all, in you're right, in the non-Haredi space, it's not, you know, there's different parts of the Dati Leumi world, so it's not a monolith, it's not uniform. But let's talk about, you know, in the more conservative world, the more which Haredim represent in a big way, there's a strong expectation that kids will follow the path of their parents in very narrow boundaries.
Yeah.
If I'm a
Vishnitzer
Chassid, you'll be a Vishnitzer Chassid. In your school, what did you have in your school?
Yeah, it was really like this.
That
like what the teachers said. It wasn't even follow the parents. It was more of follow the teachers and the school.
The community. That's a community. It's a school that belongs to a certain community within the Haredi space. And the expectation is that you follow the community norms. Now, you're always going to have tension between the individuals, those who want to do their thing, and between the community norms. And I think it's up to parents and communities and teachers and so on to be able to show the necessary measure of flexibility, of understanding, in order to say, you know, we have a way, but that way is a tent. It's not a very, you know, narrow, like a mitat dom, you know, a place that one size fits all. It's a tent, and it has flexibility. That's why in our family, let's say, you know, Abigail decided she wants to go in a Dati Leumi way. That wasn't traumatic for us.
No.
Because we're okay. You know, the family space is a Haredi space, but it's not the main thing. The main thing is to respect Torah and mitzvot. The main thing is to live a religious life. So the values
have to be strong enough that they will follow it, and the children will follow it in different ways, but they'll still stay with the values. But if someone, like, they can still choose not to hold these values.
But that's tough for a family. When a child decides to embrace a whole different set of values, to abandon the family values, that's tough. That's, quote unquote, a family will look at itself and say, you know, we failed over there. Is that necessarily the right way to think about it? No, because a lot of things happen that don't depend on the family. But nevertheless, families have at least a self-perception of it as a responsibility to pass something on. And sometimes you have to be smart about how to do that. Number one, with love and closeness and affection. Number two, with a certain flexibility to give space for that individual self-expression and realization.
That's exactly, though, the love and the flexibility that what brings the choosing a different path. It's possible. It wouldn't be possible. It would be less possible without it. If you're very loving and very flexible, then even if, like, I know for sure that if I would choose not to be religious, I'll still have a home. That means that there are values that are, I don't have to say higher, but they're still there, like different values from just being religious, right? Even though it's like a very core value in our house.
Yeah. So you'll know you still have a home, which I think is good. I think you want your children to know that they'll be loved by their parents and that love is unconditional. But you also know that your parents have expectations, and that part of your kind of, I wouldn't say mission in life, but part of your track in life is to be within the boundaries of those expectations. I think you appreciate that. You of course you could rebel against that, but that would take an act of rebellion. That's not something which you do, on the spur of the moment. It's something that requires some trauma, some crisis, something to happen, for you to go and make that decision. Like in other areas of life where we don't, abandon who we are and our, core identity and way of life. But the way of life has to be a way of life that's accepting enough to allow for the individual self-realization without getting to a point of, okay, if I'm going to have any individual self-realization, it's going to require a rebellion, and then let's just go all the way. You understand what I mean? There's a balance there that you've got to be able to strike, and sometimes that's a problem with a gap. Meaning, if the generational gap is too big and parents just don't understand the language of their children, they don't understand like what's going on with my kids. I don't get it. I have friends who speak like that. I just don't understand my kids.
You never spoke like that?
I don't understand my kids. I mean, I sometimes don't understand my kids, but not on a macro level, on a kind of micro decision level, sometimes I don't get it, right? But on a macro level, I think I do. And you're right, there's different.
Do you think it's because they don't listen? They're not together enough? Because I do think the let's say the core problems, they do stay the same. They look different, but really humans are still humans.
That's coherent. That's a pasuk you just mentioned at the beginning. Don't say, things used to be good.
That pasuk is also these, old people that say, oh, we were better. We wouldn't do that. We weren't like that.
Right. So no. So
when it's not true.
Is it not true? I think when older people say when we were young we wouldn't do that, they're probably right. Meaning there are certain things.
Yeah, but if you were young now.
Right, exactly. They don't think, well, what if we were young in this generation, and that's harder for us to do. We grew up in a certain social fabric, in a certain situation with a certain type of education that did not lead to or didn't lend itself to doing certain things that today's youth would do more naturally. That's true, and therefore there's always going to be that kind of gap. And parents, I think it's.
Also, you said there should be a gap.
There should be, but
you should be able to bridge
it. With it, right? To bridge it, to be in touch with it, to understand it. And
how do you like before you spoke a bit about bridging the gap? When we spoke about really love in the family. What other ways do you think there are to bridge the gap? It's just by like loving each other?
No, love is not all you need. It's about putting in work. Love is like all you need, but if you want a meaningful life, you have to work. No, you have to like read books together. You have to watch movies together. You have to go ice skating together. You have to do stuff. You have to like be aware of your children's situation on a social level, on a so
the parents have to become more part of the children's lives, let's say, because it's not going to happen in reverse.
Yeah, absolutely. The kids are going to go their way because of society, because of culture, because of the situation in schools. whatever it is. And it's really up to the parents to be on top of it, not on top of it in a controlling way, to be on top of it in a way that you get it, that you understand what's going on, that you have conversations into the night, that you do things together when you have the family time. And that's just so essential. And you're right, that there are families in which this doesn't happen. And that's, that's a shame. I have a friend whose son decided he wants to go to the army, like a Haredi family. You know the family. I'm not going to mention any names right now.
Later.
Whatever. And the parents were the father at the very least, was so distraught by this. He was like he was beside himself, and like my son, is going to leave the yeshiva. He wasn't learning anyway.
It happened after the war?
Like now, a few months ago. Joined a certain unit, like Haredi unit, in the army. And one of the Rabbanim of Netzach Yehuda, the organization that supports the Haredi soldiers, caught this father for a conversation. By chance, they met on the street and asked him, how you doing? How's your son doing? And he said, what can I do? And this rabbi told him, you've got to be there for him. Like, he needs you. He needs that connection. Without that connection, he's not anchored, like we spoke before. He needs to have that anchor. He needs to have that love. He needs to have, he needs you in his life. Don't do this. It was a very short conversation. The guy was in a car, stopped outside somewhere, like an elevator pitch. But he gave him this elevator pitch. Your son needs you, and that, I think, is a kind of sign of where you're not able to bridge the gap, and then things can go wrong. Things can happen that are very hard to later on to heal. Once it's fractured, very difficult to heal that.
Yeah, and also it's true that the children are not going to do. You might say, I'm expecting my kids also to do their work, but they're not going to do it. I mean, maybe when they're old enough to realize.
Maybe they'll do their work, but they'll resent it. They'll
no, they won't do. They won't put the effort to connect with their parents so easily. Like to.
Right. But,
maybe they will, but in their own way.
Because they'll be resentful. Right. And we've seen this. We've seen this with in families that we know, and that's certainly part of it. I think for our family, it's a little bit different because of this kind of England-Israel thing. Because growing up in England is different to growing up in Haredi Israel.
Yeah.
And therefore the gap that we have...
The gap is a bit reversed.
Is it? Yeah. What is it? Right. It kind of reversed. Not exactly reversed, but different. It's different. So mommy grew up in Haredi Israel.
Yeah.
But still, the house we built is a combined house. And therefore, it's a different type of a gap.
But it is true that in the beginning, our house was more Haredi, not Israeli, or never Israeli, but
more classic Haredi.
Yeah, and then when the kids grew up, like me and the rest, we grew up, so then it started to shift.
Right, but also the parents grew up, meaning parents shifted together. Also. And that shift took place kind of together with the children's growing up. That's true. I didn't think of it in that way actually till now. Maybe it was connected in some way to the children's growing up and the parents shifting to get together with that. But certainly it helped to bridge the gap, or at the very least to make it more organic, kind of an organic shift that happens as the children grow older too. And when you start to bring in all these new Israeli artists into the home, it's not like some shock horror event. No, there's space for that in the home.
Yeah, it was also slowly.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. But when you think about the previous generations, the effort of bridging the gap, do you think it was there? Because, not 50 years ago, but 100 years ago.
There was no gap. Meaning that maybe there was, but there was no. I don't
There was
think.
honor. There was fear.
I don't think there was
something
room. There was less room for thinking about this. You know. Even in my generation.
In the 60s, though, there
even
was
in
like
my
a
generation,
shift.
Shira, there was an expectation of kids will do what the parents do, and fit into that mold.
Really?
And that the relationships.
Yeah, Saba did what his parents did.
And that the relationships, that you'll have will be the same ones that we have. Meaning your couplehood with your husband will be the same as ours. It'll look the same. That was still kind of the expectation. Again, maybe for my generation it was already fading a bit, but that was the expectation in the past. The chassan teachers that I had were not teachers that said, oh, things are changing and maybe for you things will be, different from what they were for us. There was that wasn't on the table. It wasn't spoken about. But it's still
not so much on the table in the Haredi society.
It is. It's much more than it used to be.
Not officially.
Not the official rhetoric, but the Kala teachers, the Chassan teachers, they're going through. Last week, I was in a meeting that reflected or that spoke about couplehood and the problems that young couples are experiencing, and a lot of it was about this. A lot of the meeting was about how we're not preparing our young couples for their married life because our instruction is still the old style instruction, which is anchored in tradition, but without the adaptation to the expectations of young people for their marriage. And if we're not preparing, which they receive from the world, from the air they breathe.
Yeah, my friends said the same thing before they got married. They said they were super disappointed by the, instructors or whatever.
Yeah, Kala teachers, Chassan teachers.
They said they're not following. She said like she's starting the sessions by thinking she doesn't know anything about marriage, anything whatsoever, which is not the case for anyone today. And then she keeps talking about, old stuff and how she should respect her husband. I mean, it's true, but today things are different. So she said it was like super disappointing and she didn't learn anything from it. It was like...
It's a language, Shira. It's a language. It's the content, it's the language, it's the packaging, it's the expectations. And that's a problem when you're not bridging the gap, when you're not following, when you're not with it. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to change your life necessarily, but you've got to be there. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to give over that instructions, to pass over those values. And that's why we need the gap and we need to be able to bridge it.
Yeah, bridging the gap is a bit like to be there for them. Ish. I mean, it leans to the love thing that you don't like so much.
I'm into love. No, that's not true. I'm into love, but I fear the place of people saying love is all you need. That's a scary place for me. You understand me?
Yeah, it's not true. I mean, love is all you need is not true. But to bridge the gap, it's a lot about kind of to be there for them in their place and their challenges, and not just to expect them to be where you want them to be, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. And you know what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there for us where we are. That's such a deep insight. We're just about now to celebrate Purim. The Gemara tells us that wherever the Jews went into exile, the Shekhinah was there with them. What does it mean? They went down, they descended. Meaning, even in their descent, even in their cultures, they're living this Persian culture. Esther, like she kind of represents the Shekhinah. She's in the palace of Achashverosh. She's Persian. Like the Shekhinah becomes Persian, so to speak, right? Kiviyachal. But the idea is there. The Torah. That's the idea of Torah Sheba'al Peh, right? The oral tradition, which means we have a text which is set in stone, unchanging. The text stays the same. The Torah Shebichsav, the written law that we receive, the Torah, that's set. But the Torah Sheba'al Peh it develops.
Yeah.
And it's versatile. It's able to adapt to new situations. Supposed to, not so easy. I agree with you. That's a good point, and maybe to be discussed in some other episode. But yes, but that's the idea. It's supposed to be flexible. I think that's such a good kind of illustration of the gap, of the generational gap between parent and children and the community, and how it needs on the one hand to represent something unchanging. We've got those values that we receive and tradition and so on, but you have to be able to realize them in a new situation, in a new circumstance, and you've got to make that adaptation. Otherwise you lose it.
Yeah. Do you think there is a point though that you say that's it? I don't know. I don't want to say anything not to do Ayin Hara, but let's say if a child, not of our family obviously, but somebody else's family, marries a non-Jewish girl.
Okay.
So you say that's it? Do you? Does anyone? Are you supposed to say that's it?
This is like Fiddler on the Roof.
Right? That's a good generational gap story.
Yeah, Shalom Aleichem. He knew what he was talking about. Tevi the milkman, Fiddler on the Roof, that's a universal story. It's not even about the Jews. It's a Jewish setting for a universal story of generational gaps in modernity.
So many years it used to be that the religious Jews were in their communities and that was it. Like they had their lives, they had their ways, and that's it. And then when things started to change in Europe, then it changed so drastically that they didn't know exactly what to do with it. So once you set a foot in university, then you stop being religious, usually. I mean, that was usually the case. You couldn't have it both. And the parents and the rabbis, they weren't like, oh, well, you can still share our values. No, it was like, you choose that way, then you're not with us. And I guess after the Holocaust, maybe, so it changed because we can't really live like this. You can't keep the young generation in line with the values of religion. If anything they do, you're like, no.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's necessarily or specifically after the Shoah, but certainly those attitudes changed over time by dint of reality, because we have to address the world as is and not some imagined world or what we'd like or what we think we'd like it to be. But one way or the other, you're going to have red lines. Of course you'll have red lines. Those red lines don't mean we're going to, never speak to each other again. It doesn't have to be, the Fiddler on the Roof scenario. But of course families have red lines. That's the whole point. You've got to make space. You've got to say these are our values and there are different ways to realize them. And you've got to say, well, and this is a repudiation, this is a rejection of our values. And when there's a rejection of our values, that's going to have consequences. I think that unconditional love is a wonderful thing, and parents and children will always have that unconditional love, but it will have consequences. As for being a part of the family, you can't imagine, for example, your example of like marrying a non-Jewish spouse and that not having ramifications on the family in which you grew up and grew up in a way that we're carrying on the Jewish tradition. That's the anchor, that's the definition, that's the identity, like, that's everything. And it's you're pointing out, right? What do you mean that's everything? What about love? Yeah. So love is everything on the one hand, but Judaism is everything on the other hand, and those two everythings.
Yeah, love is not everything, but there is a balance somewhere, because
so the love will
you
be. You
probably won't kick out your kid.
The love will be in a place of, we're waiting for you. We'll always be there for you. We love you.
It annoys me because that's what the families of these soldiers, that's also what they say. Oh, of course we love him. I say the Sefer Tehillim for him every day. Oh, thank you.
Right. So the question is, where's your red lines? You've got, there can't be a situation, that red lines have to be few and far between. There's not so many of them. And going to the army is not one of them. But
for you.
Yes. And if it is, I think that's disappointing, because you have to think, like, what is the most crucial, essential, defining element of your family, of your community, of who you are, and of course when you break everything down, then that's going to have ramifications. It's not, it's not something which you can imagine. However, I think it's up to parents to make sure that they give enough space, that going to, that things that are within that space don't become like rebellions and have these, dramatic ramifications. But good generational gap stuff. Actually, I think this brings out some of it too. So I think it was a good episode to start with.
A good first episode.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think we should finish here. It was a great conversation about the generational gap, which is a very interesting topic, and there's much more to say about it. But we'll stop here. This was the first episode of the Rabbi's Daughter podcast. Thank you everyone for watching or listening, and we're looking forward for the next episode. Thank you, Abba.
Good. Thank you, Shirin. Thank you for the initiation. It was kind of joint, but I think it was mainly from the energy came from your side. So thank you. I have to say, it's been instructional for me too. A lot to learn, and I hope for you and for the listeners.
Yeah.
And we'll see everyone next time.
Yeah.